Hello, Jonathan. How are
Hello,
you?
Jenny. I'm great. I'm great. I'm happy to be with you.
I am excited to be here too. And for all of you watching this, this is a special hello, goodbye interview with Jonathan Ellerby, PhD, who has been our spiritual director for the Althea Center for going on 7 years.
Exactly
And
7 years.
yes.
And that's why we're finally doing the big expose because I'm about to get out of Dodge.
Oh, yeah. So now all the scandal. I mean, you thought what Oprah got from royalty a couple weeks ago was
Whoa, right?
revealing. Oh, yeah. This is
That was
this is going to
crazy.
make the Queen Mother blush, right?
I,
Except it's not. It might
yeah,
make her cry though, because we're going to go there. We have to. Can't help ourselves.
maybe.
But no, and as you know, Jonathan, we've had all these different celebrations and town halls and all sorts of things as you're going on, and Althea goes on to its next incarnation. Um, and this was a great idea that you had to come back to this one-on-one interview, which we did back at the beginning of the pandemic. If you remember, it was pretty much the
Yeah.
beginning that we were looking for ways to reach out to the community. How can we still connect via Zoom
Mhm.
and things like that? And
Raise some money.
yes, and raise money. That was a fundraiser. So people feel free to give us money at any time. But this is not particularly a fundraiser, but it worked well, right? We got to ask you some questions that
Oh,
people were
yeah.
interested in. We had a live audience. This time we don't have a live audience, but I think I've got some questions that will cover what many people might want to know. And it's mostly going to focus on your time at Althea.
Right.
Not as much after and not as much before, but please bring those things in. And I'll start by saying, now, unless you have anything else intro-wise, I was going to kind of move in.
Oh, no, I mean, really,
Okay.
I want to recognize that I think the whole interview idea, the credit goes to you. I think that interview we did before was a lot of fun. And I think that the one thing that I felt like contributing actually came from Susan, which was she asked me the question, like, do you think you're ever going to share some reflections on what you learned
Ah,
over the last 7 years? And I thought, Ginny, so
well, there
let's
you
go.
go. There you go. And I realize I didn't introduce myself completely. I'm Ginny Castleberry, a member of Althea. I sit on the board and I'm otherwise just really nosy about wanting to ask Jonathan questions. And so, he said yes. So that's why I'm sitting in this seat
Yes.
and not one of you. Well, Jonathan, when I think of you, who do I think of? What famous person am I
Oh,
going to think?
Matthew McConaughey in the movie Contact.
You wish. You wish. Don't
Did you
take your
see?
shirt off.
No, but did you see that movie Contact?
Yeah, and I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see that.
I
I
was
can see that.
specific. I said Contact. I didn't say some surfing movie.
Well, and I
So
told you
he was,
Simon
I think he
Sinek
was a
years ago.
minister. I think he was a
He
minister
was
in
a
that
minister.
movie.
No, that
Yeah,
was yeah, you definitely you could have played that role for sure.
I do play
Um,
that role.
right. But no, of course I think of Brad Pitt. Dude,
Brad Pitt. What?
well, for several reasons. Number one, because I'm
What?
theming this, he did 7 years in Tibet,
Yes, I'll
the
take that.
movie. So you can do 7 years in Althea land.
Oh,
This is kind of what this is. But wasn't it, to
you're so
me,
funny.
one of your funniest, best stories is about the monk that you sat next to?
Oh my gosh.
Now, I'm not going to say any more in case you want to save that story for something, or maybe at the
Oh,
end we can talk about it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
yes, I haven't thought of that in so long.
I loved that story start to finish. It's kind of a long one.
I can
It's a
summarize it.
but it's a great story. Well, let's come back to it, right? Because
Okay,
we have
because
so many things.
you've just teased people. We got to hit that at some point.
We totally will. So you have to remember to bring that up because I've got my notes here. But yeah, so
Oh,
7 years in Althea land,
okay.
right? That's an homage to Brad Pitt. Um, and also paraphrasing Jerry Garcia, what a long, strange, and beautiful trip it's been. I think, for the 7 years. And I'm going to try to take these questions, and some are going to be light and some are going to be deep and dark, but they're all going to be fun. So let's start with an interesting one. When you came on board, knowing only what you knew, what were you afraid of or concerned with that never materialized? Didn't happen.
Oh, okay. So everyone watching this should know, if they're a part of the live premiere or recorded, I have no idea what Jenny's about to ask me. So this is the first surprise. What was I afraid of that didn't happen? Well, first of all, I think two things. I think when I came, the first thing we did was actually a community like think tank brainstorm visioning session. We did it on the stage, and because the community was relatively small at the time, I mean, just about everybody came. It was like 25 people. And I remember, some people that are still very active were there. And I was facilitating and flip charting, and it was really all about this vision of becoming more fully what they had already begun. Now, I just want to quickly say, I think that interestingly here, 7 years later, we're in the same moment, which is we grew into the vision, but we've already started to move into something next. And that's what has to be realized, right? It's not about going backwards. So the vision that was put forward was to really stop being known as a church, to start being known as a center, a place that's inclusive, that's eclectic, that explicitly does not focus on any one tradition, although the divine science mysticism would be the core of it, the belief in oneness, God is everything, but that our message and meaning would become much more intentionally global. And so I was afraid that there would be regret and backlash, that while that all sounded good in the moment, that people didn't really want it, and they would want to go back to the divine science program as it was. Now, I do believe we always honored the wisdom of divine science, even when it was never named. I also know that some people did leave because they wanted more divine science. And there were a few times over the last 7 years where different personality came forward to say, let's do more divine science. And it just never really stuck. I mean, there'd be some good attendance for, let's say, Jane Kopp doing a workshop or something like that. But, I think it's important that people know we didn't run it out of town. It just seemed like it was ready for a different iteration. That was a big surprise, though, that transition went as smoothly as it did. And the only other thing I would add is that I have to admit, I did expect that at some moment we would be targeted more directly and aggressively by some outside hostile entity. And I mean either a more radical Christian group that would see us as kind of, right? Because one thing that people don't realize is that when they do call Althea a church, it's actually quite offensive to more traditional Christian people. Like, they always think that my main goal is just to be inclusive so we don't scare off the hippies. But we've had over the years, it's not very common, but we've had some people come expecting a church, like they expected Bible verses and scripture and Jesus, and they left in the middle of the service. Or they would come to me after and say, thanks for having me. We'll never be back. My friends called this a church. I don't know what you call it, but good luck with that. So I thought that might escalate. And sadly, we've seen so much violence against spiritual and religious communities in recent years. And I'm just very grateful that neither of those two scenarios happened.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Was that a surprising answer?
It was surprising.
I mean, we even had some moments where I had guys in the community on security by the doors because of weird things that were going on in the city,
right.
or because of violence going on in certain religious
Right.
communities. Once in a while, and this might have come, this might be in your future questions. I mean, every once in a while, people will target someone like me for all kinds of weird reasons, and I'll get hate mail or weird posts on Facebook or YouTube, people saying I'm from the
Right.
devil or I'm a charlatan or whatever, those kinds of
Right.
things that happens. So, there were a couple of moments where between all these factors, I definitely had, it sounds a little sexist, but I had some of the boys at the back of the room. I think maybe that's just partly because some of the guys just came forward offering to help. But yeah, that's kind of weird, right?
It is, which is a nice segue into what surprised you most, because this was really your first time as just a spiritual leader. I know you've been like a chaplain around medical communities, right? That sort of thing, and maybe even with indigenous folks, but this was your first time as, a minister type person, which we call spiritual director. So what surprised you most about that role that you didn't see coming?
Well, okay. So technically the term you're looking for is congregational ministry.
Ah,
That's the technical term. So, I'd certainly been seen as a spiritual teacher, a spiritual leader, a spiritual blah, 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 lots of that. But a congregational minister is really a spiritual teacher, whatever, rabbi, guru, whatever, that is entrusted with the leadership of a community and its rituals and its philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So, well, one of the first things that comes to mind is that I remember, speaking of working in hospitals, I remember when I was the director of spiritual care at a hospital in Canada, and we had a little team of chaplains, and then we also had congregational ministers that would come in and use our office and coffee room to kind of write notes and check charts and find out who needed to be visited. So we kept the records of people who wanted religious visits. And I would sit and visit with some of them because some of them were regulars. And I just remember feeling really dismissive and maybe, I don't know if I'd say judgmental, but certainly dismissive and not very empathetic or sympathetic when I heard them talk about how difficult congregational ministry was. And they all talked about it. I mean, it was just like they were all getting beaten up by their communities all the time, and they could never make everyone happy. And it just, I don't know, it was a lot of kvetching, as we say in Yiddish, just a lot of like weird sort of complaining. And I just thought, come on, you got it easy, right? Like, I'm in a hospital, people are dying, doing last rites and emergency and the whole thing. And I got to tell you, all those years later, it's not like, it felt, all the work has felt very natural to me. And I never really thought of it like a job in the sense that it really is a calling. I never had regrets. I never felt anything was unreasonable. But there were some hard moments and some demanding things, and there were some big adjustments in attitude and consciousness in terms of how to manage community as opposed to business or workshop, or it's a totally different animal than anything else you can imagine. And I didn't really believe that. I really thought, hey, I can speak to a group of 1,000, I can run a group of 30, I can run a business. How different can this be? It's totally different. Totally different.
right.
And I think if you're not really fully equipped, I think it's secretly, I get it now, I think it secretly eats away at a lot of these spiritual leaders, and I can understand why.
Well, and that brings me to a question that you had said I could ask. And again, audience, we didn't set these questions up ahead of time. We just had some kind of themes. And that's why I feel comfortable asking it. Was there a time where you almost wanted to quit? I mean, before now and
Yeah.
pandemic-y stuff and what led you to accept this new position. Was there ever something that made you think, done, out of here?
So yes and no. I never ever thought, I really actually never thought of leaving Althea for real, period. Like not like a feeling that lasted days where I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is a joke, or this is too much, or, whatever. I mean, people have that with jobs. I think that's reasonable. I don't think I ever really had that. I just kind of felt, I always ultimately felt like this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. I'm actually quite present moment as a person. But I definitely had moments, like nights, where I felt like, screw this. And I can tell you the theme was almost always the same. And I can only, if I think about when it happened, I can only think about maybe a few occasions. It typically evolved around me having the feeling that I really went above and beyond for an individual. And then somehow at the end of it all, they responded with an attack, not only on me, my personality and my capacity, but also on the community itself. So every once in a while, someone would kind of show up, kind of challenge who we are, challenge what we're doing. And in my mind, I would bend over backwards to hear them, to accommodate them, to validate them. And then it would kind of end up with something like, well, I guess people like you will just always serve people like that. And then, whatever color they want to add to it. So, yeah, I mean, and, in one case, I'm just thinking of two in particular. One case, someone basically was saying like, no one at Althea is serious about spirituality. And I guess it would just take someone like me who's comfortable spoon feeding people basically spiritual baby formula. I was pissed. And the reason why it made me want to leave was just this feeling like, is that like really what's coming across here? Like, I did not sign up to be demeaned by this kind of a situation where I've given all I can to someone and it comes back really insulting. Another situation, which was quite amusing, someone was convinced that I was both a charlatan and aligned with the devil. And I thought that wasn't itself what offended me, because that's so absurd. I mean, if you're a charlatan for 30 years doing something, I guess if you faked it for 30 years, if you fake playing in the NBA for 30 or whatever, 27 years, I guess you pass as a basketball player. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was so absurd. And the whole thing about the devil was a little bit bizarre. But what was frustrating was that it was probably the only moment when this person started to infect some people in the community to question my motives and our direction.
This person
And
wasn't able to convince people you were of the devil, were they?
no, I don't think anyone quite bought that part of it.
Okay.
But, now here's the interesting thing to maybe jump ahead, which is that stuff is actually not very uncommon in spiritual communities. In fact, churches, you'll hear from almost any congregational leader, just about any time a board changes over, in particular, someone's trying to get rid of the minister, whoever it is, the man, the woman. Getting rid of the minister is just a thing. And I have to admit, in 7 years, that was really the only real kind of attack. And relative to what I know my colleagues go through in other traditions and communities and churches, it's nothing. So I don't really have anything to complain about, but yeah, just that feeling of giving everything I possibly can and then having it met with, well, that's just not enough. That's the kind of thing that would really keep me up at night.
Well, and you bring up the point that you lived, which is it's still a job, right? I mean, it's spiritual, but it's still a job. And you're being asked to have a certain amount of perfection about you because it's spiritual that, say, the CEO of Coca-Cola maybe doesn't have to deal with, right?
Right.
In fact, that was one of my questions, or one of the discussion points I wanted to bring up, that I think has been hard for people with you leaving, right? Is seeing your spiritual leader has feet of clay, right? I mean, they're a real person. They aren't perfect. They're messy. They're going to do things that aren't in your timing. They're going to do things you don't understand. And there's something about when we place someone on a pedestal like we do a spiritual leader, they just have that much further to fall, right? And I'm sure that all the gurus of the world could sit around and talk about how much that sucks, right? That you're held to the standard of perfection because you're dealing with the spirit. And yet, in every lecture I ever saw you give, there was always a component of this is messy, this is imperfect, people will disappoint you, people will go their own, way. Have you been part of a spiritual group where the leader left?
Oh, that's such an interesting question.
Or like an indigenous community, were you part of connected to that, where someone in leadership there left and people were upset?
Yeah, boy, you kind of, there's a lot I would be happy to explore after answering this, if you want to get into what do people project and what's that experience like? That's an interesting topic. But yeah, I was in a sort of. So I actually just shared this kind of candidly in a small group for Althea that I was doing. But I did have a related experience. And basically what it was is, and here's the theme. And I've said this to a lot of people at Althea. In every truly growing, evolving spiritual community, if it's truly growing and it's committed to spiritual growth, not just financial growth, not just numbers, but if it's any place of deep work, there will always be a threshold with the teacher, always. Now, typically, it's the feet of clay scenario where you find out they're embezzling, or you find out they're philanderer, or you find out, some horrible impropriety.
Or just human. When I say feet of clay, I don't mean any scandal. I just mean they're human. They get angry,
right.
or they get petty, or they don't have time for you, or
Yeah, but
right?
I mean, in terms of the question about leaving, I'm just saying that when a community is doing deep work, facing a transition around leadership is almost always a part of the equation, because there's no way for a community to grow unless they integrate and transcend their teacher again and again and again. There's a famous saying by the Buddha: if you see the Buddha on the road, or you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And the idea is that at any point where you feel like you're safe because someone's got your future in their hands, or someone's got your spiritual journey in their hands, you've lost something. And if they're I don't even know if it matters if they're a good teacher, but if the work is real, then at some point the community is going to have to be challenged to integrate what they've learned and not let the lesson live outside in the teacher. You've got to make it yours and then continue to grow. Now, having said that, quickly, so looking at it more broadly, like, have I been in a transitional moment with a teacher in a community? Yes. And it was a situation where basically a community, just like I said earlier, split. And there was one beloved teacher, and then there was like scandal and team taking and blame and just all kinds of basic human emotional stuff that blew up, and everyone felt they had to pick sides. And I was heartbroken by this in every way, mostly because of the division in the community, less about the teacher, actually. And what I had to do was really integrate the lessons, consider I might be losing my community and teacher, kind of grow up so to speak. I'm just talking about myself, and say, wow, am I really losing everything I think I'm losing if I lose this community or if I lose this teacher? And the conclusion I came to was no. I mean, it lives inside me, and whatever I haven't realized yet, it's time for me to get to work. So I took a break from that community. And then when the dust settled, fortunately, the community was still there and the teacher was still there, and I could go back to it. But it was, it was like more than a year, which for me was pretty big. It was like a year and a half at least, where I just felt this is over. And it was very sad, just very, very sad. But
Wow.
powerful and important. And I wouldn't be who I am if that hadn't happened.
Right. I mean, isn't that everything, right?
Yeah,
The hardest things are what shape us the most and probably the best. And that's, to me, I have a list of what I call the hard truths. Like if one day when I'm, 90 years old and somebody wants wisdom, I'm going to talk about the hard truths that life has, suffering being one. But that idea that you have to go through the hard stuff to really grow and learn. And it's toughy. Well, let's lighten it up just a little bit. Let's put a little humor in here.
I'm just touching my screen, so nobody freak out. I'm just checking my display here. Keep going.
You look fine. You look fine. So we're going to add a little humor here, and take a moment if you have to really think of a good example of this. There must have been a few of these, but was there one Sunday service that stands out that went crazy, that went off the rails, where nothing was right? Tell us a little bit about that Sunday. Maybe some of us were there and didn't even know.
3 things immediately come to mind. So first I want to say, and I can make them all short, but first I want to say, fortunately, I think we've always pulled off a certain amount of polish and completeness. So it never fell apart per se. And of course, I'm also good at integrating chaos. So 2 of them were about Easter. Yeah, the most, really, probably the most heavily attended service we have. I mean, even Christmas, I don't know, we're talking 200 to 300 people at our Easters. Okay, so the first one, this is so crazy. So I guess someone parked in the alley. Do you remember this? And then
I do.
Somebody coming in saw that happening. And instead of coming up to the sound guy and whispering, or coming to the edge of the stage and say, hey, Jonathan, can you make an announcement? Somebody's getting towed. He stood at the back of the room and just basically yelled out, people are getting towed. If you're in the back, you better go. And I mean, 30, 40 people got up and left, because of course, who knew what that meant? Was it the alley? Was it that little lot that belongs to the house? Was there something wrong with the way we, and then of course, it wasn't just that. It was kind of like people turned around and were like, which lot? Well, I think it's there. And I'm just like, are we literally in the middle of this service with people who never come, and
so professional,
right? Super important message. And the whole thing was felt like 5 minutes of just, and then people left and some people didn't come back. It was so weird. So weird. And honestly, I wasn't angry. I just could barely stop laughing, because I was like, this is absurd. I had another situation where a community member, and I want to be, it's hard, right? Because I don't want anyone to watch this and suddenly think, oh my gosh, maybe that was me, and he's talking about me. But there was a moment where there were a couple of moments, there were more than a few moments, where a community member would be really enraged by something going on in the community. And typically it was just, personal stuff, like, I was supposed to volunteer with this, but then someone replaced me and they didn't tell me, or someone said this about me and no one defended me, whatever. The issues were never insurmountable, but for whatever reason, they were enraged. And a few times I can think of, just before I hit the stage, I'm telling you, I have the announcements in my hand. I'm standing by the organ. I am about to get on stage and say, hey, everybody. And they are like right there, like Steven's playing the music and they are in my face. And they didn't do this and you didn't do that. And, da, 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 da. And then the music would stop and they'd go, oh, I better sit down. And I'd be like, hello, welcome to Althea. Like that was just cuckoo bananas. Anyway, I think those are enough stories.
Those are good. Those are good stories.
Oh, but we also, I should say, I mean, of a different nature, I mean, we recovered many things that nobody ever knew. Musician didn't come, reader didn't come, performer that was paid didn't come, blessing giver didn't come. I mean, believe me, there was tons of that, especially in the earlier years, where there was just less people around to make everything happen. Oh yeah. And we just sweep it up and get on.
That's right.
Act like it was all just the way it was supposed to be. Yeah.
Well, and in fact, I can't think of any Sunday, and I've been to a lot of Sundays over the last 4 years, going on 5, really. I can't think of anything that truly derailed us. There was that time where there was a person, I'm just going to stop there, who seemed to be a little out of it and was right near the front and was talking back and forth. Oh, speaking of talking, come on in.
Yes, come on. Let's just do this. It's easier to bring her in.
Yeah.
Alusha, I'm doing an interview.
Howdy doody.
With Ginny. Do you remember Naomi's mom?
Do you remember Naomi? Yeah, Naomi. Do you know, Alusha, we went to the doctor for Naomi's annual visit. She grew 4 inches.
Holy Lord.
Last year. 4.
That's a lot.
And we're little people. We're not going anywhere. Hey, Alusha.
Is your show on?
Thanks for saying hi.
Is it on?
Dad.
Go watch your show.
Dad.
Sorry.
Hey.
We might have to edit this.
No.
Right.
Oh, sweetie, please, you just go watch the show you have, and I'll get the other one later or tomorrow. There's a lot of cartoon watching while we're doing this interview, and you know what? This is a great example. You know, with this work, it's funny. It's hard to realize how much it overflows into every part of your life, and you know, maybe this is not comfortable for some people to hear, but now that I'm pulling away, I'm realizing, like, I never really noticed that first thing in the morning. I mean, I checked my phone. Did the boiler break? Is someone in the community having a crisis? Just, you know, so many of the board members have busy lives and don't send something until the evening, right? Or, you know, like today, my wife had to make a sudden trip to the doctor. I think everything's going to be fine, but we couldn't get around that, you know? And so there's this, like, it's actually 24/7. I never really appreciated that, but it kind of is, at least in terms of being on my mind and me feeling available. And sometimes it's quieter, and I certainly have flexibility, right? There's a lot of great, beautiful things that come with a role like this. But yeah, a Sunday morning live online, and like 5 minutes before, and you know, again, maybe she is sick or she's got to work and I'm doing the kids, and then I got to put on a video, and the next thing you know, it's like 3 minutes later, hi everybody, let's breathe with spirit, you know?
See, Matthew McConaughey, Brad Pitt, you're channeling it. I mean, folks, I told you I'm going to give you good stuff.
All right.
The dog vomited. His dog vomited.
Literally
minutes
when
before we were starting.
Like at 11 o'clock.
And
so Alusha was set up with the cartoon. I'm getting ready to put the camera on with Ginny, and the dog's heaving.
Yeah. We made it through dog vomit. So, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Back to the questions.
So another humorous one then. I've attended a lot of your discussions, some of your classes, and especially those Thursday discussions back in the day. We tried to be compelling and ask hard questions. And we had a couple that were about sex and anger and da-da. So can you tell us a story about like the most embarrassing or weirdest or strangest question or comment that ever came up in a class or a discussion that kind of was like, oh, well, we're talking about this now?
So I started laughing because, okay, so first of all, what Jenny's talking about is our Thursday Explorations group has been going on forever, like 5 years, maybe 6. And it did go through different iterations. So sometimes it used to be a little more class-like you said, where I would have I'd have a theme, do a little bit more of a presentation that was kind of Q&A. It evolved into more of just community sharing and discussion. Okay, so I will say, and now maybe I'm going to get in trouble because there's still time left in our interview. I'm not easily embarrassed. There's nothing for me that's outside spirit. So people can they can ask me about anything and I will not be embarrassed. Now, maybe some things I won't answer usually out of respect for other people in my life. But what I can tell you does happen once in a while is what somebody themselves shares will just be like so wildly left field or just so wildly revealing. It doesn't happen a lot though. So a couple examples might be something like, once in a while, we're doing a go around and then someone, rather than talking about the topic, just starts talking about their medical problems. And then we end up hearing about diarrhea and we hear about, right? You get the drift. So once in a while that happens. Now I have to tell you, the upside of it is our community, and I truly think this is special about our community is very genuine. I almost always, for the whole 7 years, have found people willing to be gracious and considerate. Now, not everybody, but really, for the most part, when those weird things happen, people are pretty good. Similarly, when you brought up sex, yeah, I think there were a couple times where people would disclose some pretty freaky habits or needs that were not, comfortable for the group. Like, oh, well, Sally and I here, we like to do, and then, okay, let's move on to someone else who hasn't spoken, like we don't need to know how you tie up your neighbors. It's fine. It's just not for us. So yeah, that's more the kind of stuff, more what people share. I can't think of anything anybody's ever asked me that felt like too much or too extreme. I kind of like that stuff.
Oh, good. Okay. Because yeah, we had death and I don't know, immortality and losing faith. And I mean, we would get as serious as a person can. And that's one of the things that drew me even further into Althea were some of those earliest discussion groups and just hearing people talk about what it was like to come out as LGBTQ,
right?
What it was like to deal with, past sexual abuse. I mean, people were just
trauma, violence,
amazing in what they would share. And you shared stories of times when you were with Indigenous folks or whatever, and just some of the, stuff that went on that people lived through.
Oh, yeah.
That you were like, damn, if somebody can live through that,
yeah,
I'll live through anything. Well, so to get back then a little to the serious here, I think about there was the young man, I won't mention his name, who took his own life, who was part of our congregation.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm thinking as the spiritual leader, because all of us say, oh my gosh, I sat across from him at the lunch table 2 weeks before, and what if I would have asked him this, or what if I would have done this? Could I have changed the outcome? And as the spiritual leader, I mean, do you think to yourself, what could I have done to help him?
Yeah.
So I guess talk a little bit about, without getting personal, or letting us know who, you can keep it general. Who's someone you think you helped the most? Like, what's an example of somebody that you're like, wow, I think I really impacted this person?
Yeah.
And who's somebody that you're like, damn it, I dropped the ball on that, or I wish I would have done something different?
So I'm going to give you like a really non-answer, but it's my answer. So first of all, I think this might be an interesting answer, even though it may not be what you were looking for. So first of all, I have to tell you honestly, and very honestly, I have no clue who I have impacted the most. And what I mean by that is there's people who attend so many things I do, and I can't personally see a lot of change in their life. There's people who've attended very few things that I've done and have written me letters knowing I'm leaving saying, I came twice, but something you said was like a key and changed my life forever. I can't believe, whatever. I also know people that have been very regular and very committed to Althea and my classes who have changed remarkably over the years. So what I want to say is, in the end, the big changes and transformations are really, it sounds cliche, but it's really not about me. I really believe that. It's all about people's willingness to do the work. And when they are willing to do it, it's about them in spirit. And I mean that for real. It's just not about me. And I say that because that's my point is, if I can say something offhanded that's not very profound and it changes a life, or I can just pound at something truly profound with someone and it does nothing, it's just clearly not about me, right? It's about their readiness and the timing and their own consciousness and karma. Now, having said that, that's also how I feel about things that don't go well. So there's definitely people we've lost from the community. Either they've just felt unheard or seen and they left, or people that have I guess left with tragedy, I guess, if I could use that. But something I say all the time, and it's been a big help for me managing everything over the last 7 years, and I believe this. The main reason we are here is for the soul's evolution. I really believe we are souls. I really, really believe that. I don't believe that we are anything that can be destroyed or taken. And so, and when I say that, it just means that I don't believe anybody dies too young. And I believe that if someone takes their life, I don't think one person could be responsible for not saying enough or saying too much, because the web of interconnection and cause and effect is just too grand. I mean, what was really the linchpin in someone's deepest despair? Was it really the last person they talked to? Was it their third grade teacher? Was it losing a pet? Was it something biochemical? Was it something, did they have a soul mission to come as a teacher and teach through their suffering? I just can't possibly guess what people's journeys are about or who's really here to teach what. Now that might sound like abdication, but that's how I feel. So when someone goes, I don't feel it the way a lot of people do. And it's not because I'm heartless. I love that person. I love that soul, but it's just not my business how they're supposed to live.
Well, and I have to say, I've heard you talk about, a few times losing your father and the fact that you and your father didn't really communicate great, not like the relationship, say, you have with your mom or something
Right.
that's much more open and sharing. But you've talked about how it's like, that's just the way it was. And in the next, life will be something different, and we'll come together and we'll go apart and we'll come together. You talked about that with your son when he had a medical crisis where you were like,
Yeah.
I may be
Oh, yeah.
witnessing the end.
Yeah.
This could be it. And you said you started to freak like a human being freaks. And then you went to a place of, you know what, we've been together, we're going to be together. I got to just power through this. And you did. And he's, alive and healthy and happy and all that, but he'll go one day and you'll go one day and I'll go one day, so I've heard you talk about that up on the stage and share the most personal experiences of that with us.
Yeah. Wow. brought up a lot of emotion because, yeah, that was really a scary moment with my son. With my dad, no, I mean, like you said, I mean, that was before he died. I think we just really made peace with each other. Like, it's okay to agree to disagree, and we can love each other despite our differences. And, in fairness to my dad, and out of respect for people who may still struggle with parents that were not, what they needed, I do have to say, because my dad honored who I was, there wasn't much more that I needed from him. Do you know what I'm saying? I
Right.
think that's a deep wound for a lot of people, to not feel seen
Yeah.
or allowed, honored, recognized. So my dad and I were very opposite people in so many ways. But I will say, I don't know why I thought to comment on this. I will say that the blessing was that I think I just always felt supported by him despite all that. And that, to his credit, was what made it much easier for me to come forward, to come to him and meet him more than halfway. That moment with my son, it's funny you brought this up, because I'm going to share something that's a practice. It's a practice. And I think it's just really creepy and weird, and most people will not like to hear this. Almost every day, and certainly several times a week, I take a moment. It's just so awful to say this, but I take a moment to contemplate the end of the life of each and every person I hold most dear. I really do. There's a phrase that has always been with me. It's if I had to tattoo something, it's the kind of thing I would tattoo on my wrist or whatever, and it's keep death close. And my daughter's 4, my son's turning 13, or my daughter's turning 4, my son's turning 13. My wife and I have been together 7 years. Like, they're very dear to me. My nuclear family is very, very precious to me. But I consider every day could be my daughter's last, my son's last, my wife's last, my mother's last. And that sounds really macabre, but it has quite the opposite effect for me. I cherish every day with them, and I try to enjoy them every day, to have fun with them every day, to express love for them every day, because I don't know their journey. I really don't. Or maybe I'm going to be the one that goes early. I just don't know those things. And it's not a dark obsession. It's not something I dwell on for hours or very long at all, but it's just impermanence, right? Again, a Buddhist reference. It's just remembering the impermanence of the things that we put so much attachment in or value in. And I'll go one step further. Some people have asked me about this moving from Althea and what it really means about what I think about Althea. Like, does this mean you are sick of it? Does this mean you don't believe in where it's going? Does this mean, like, no, it's none of that. It's none of that. I can love something and follow my own evolution and honor its evolution. Attachment and control don't mean anything. They don't signify value or importance or whatever. In fact, I can leave something or someone out of love and holding space for its highest good. There's no spiritual correlation between staying together and breaking up. Really. And since I'm rambling on this, Mark Samuel, I've talked about, and he's been on one of our interviews. Mark was the one who taught me how to fire people. Now, I don't think I really fired anyone at Althea, but I used to have other jobs where I employed more people or supervised more people. And I just remember he was in my life as a mentor when I had to let somebody go. And I was really dreading it and fretting over it. I don't like conflict. And I didn't want to hurt this person. And he said to me, whoa, 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 what makes you think you're hurting this person? And how dare you tell the story for them when you don't know where this is going to take them. This could be the best thing that happens to them. Don't assume that when something doesn't work out professionally, or for that matter, romantically or otherwise, he said, don't assume it's a bad thing. Nothing lasts forever. And if we're all evolving, then it has to be a part of the evolution. When something ends, it's got to be a blessing, because evolution is the direction of life. And I was like, damn, I never thought about that before. And then, my last work in Mexico, if someone had to be fired, I wanted to do it because I didn't trust the way some other people would do it. I wanted to be the one to say, you need to be fulfilled and your best self, and you need to be honored. And obviously this isn't a fit. So don't push on in a place where it's not a fit. If it's not a fit, let's help you find a place where you're really valued and you feel valuable and you realize your gifts. Because everybody, again, it sounds cliche, everybody has gifts. Everyone has something to contribute. There's no sense in forcing a relationship that doesn't celebrate your highest good.
Very cool. Very cool. And having been a manager before and had to give people tough reviews and things like that, I'm with you in that if you can kind of connect to what's the best, regardless of the individual, me, you, whatever, what are we looking at here, right? What are we really looking at, and get to that, they usually understand it, even if they're angry a little bit.
Yeah.
They usually get it, and it's a much better way than hanging on to something that doesn't fit anymore or making up reasons for why it doesn't fit. Just better to deal with it. Believe it or not, we're coming to the end, and I want you to be able to tell your story that we referred to back at the beginning. So what I'm wondering, tell me if you want to do it this way or if you want to do it a different way. I was going to kind of close with you, right? And because I've got a quote or two that I wanted to bring up, and you can comment on them. They're about moving on and starting over and things. Maybe we close officially, then you launch into your story, the Monk Brad Pitt thing.
Oh,
that's what I'm talking about.
Or flip it around. Well, I'll tell you something. I think I have a way to tell the story briefly that will set up your closing quotes and questions.
Go for it.
So
go for it.
And it's too bad because I'm going to have to be short, but it is a great story. So I was in Dharamsala, India, or technically an area called McLeod-Ganj, which is where the Dalai Lama's temple is. So most people know the Dalai Lama lives in exile in India, East Tibet was annexed by China. So for a very long time, he's had his home monastery there in Dharamsala. And I happened to be staying there at a time where he was away, but coming home. So I did actually get to meet him. That's kind of a fun part of the story. But before he returned, and I had arrived and found out about this incredible place, I learned that one of the spiritual practices of the Tibetan people that lived there in that town was to walk the sacred path around the temple. And that it's considered like a prayer, like a blessing, to go around the temple on the sacred path. Some would have prayer wheels. Some of the monks would do the prostration where they stand and kneel and lay down, and the whole deal. Very significant practice. Well, again, long story short, I went early one morning. You go at like 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, sunrise. And I found the temple and I kind of figured out, I saw the path and no one was around. And I didn't know, like, did you have to ask permission? Did you have to pay something? Did you have to wear something? I don't know. So I, start my meditation and I'm praying like, oh, this is very powerful and sacred. And I can't believe I'm getting to be a part of this. And I'm walking and I'm very, contemplative and internal. And the next thing I kind of realize is there's some people up ahead coming, and I kind of go to the side and they pass me. And then some more people come and they pass me, and then some monks come and they pass me. And all of a sudden I realized, like, I am the only person going this direction And it's like so painfully obvious that I am the white guy that is doing it literally backwards, like backwards. And here I am trying to be holy and sacred, and I'm just like the jackass. So I kind of pull over to the side and I sit on a bench waiting for some people to pass so I can now go the right way and act like I know what I'm doing. And this was incredibly fortuitous because quite an elderly monk came and sat down beside me and struck up a conversation. And one of the first things he asked me was, I think it was, do you know Brad Pitt? And I was like, what? It was something like that, right? And then I realized he didn't have the best English. I think what he meant was, do you know of Brad Pitt? And then he proceeded to explain, like, me in movie. He was an extra in the film 7 Years in Tibet. So we kind of got off to a nice conversation. Somehow he was curious why I was there. And I shared something about my spiritual work. And I don't know, I guess he saw something in me and he said, come with me. And he took me into the inner temple and he took me to his quarters and he shared some sacred texts. And he explained to me that he wanted me to come back every morning to join him in the temple in prayer. And I spent the next month going every day at 5:30 in the morning, not to do the walk, but to go into the temple with the monks. I was the only white face in there, the only person not in the red robes. And it was like an incredible life-changing event. Lucia is coming to say hi again. So,
Daddy, I want to say no.
So anyway, the reason why I wanted to connect that story with what we're talking about is it's the perfect example of how you never know how what appears to be a mistake, how what appears to be something unwanted, an unexpected visitor like this little person, how it actually becomes a blessing, right? I mean, it was really, truly a blessing for me. And if I hadn't screwed up royally and been embarrassed and done it wrong, I never would have had that door opened for me. I mean, literally. So when we talk about transition and times of change and what we can learn from it, I think that's a great segue, because what looks like an ending, you know the saying, what looks like a terrible ending to the caterpillar, which is like dissolving into your own goo, is actually just a beginning. So I'm laughing because my wife is now trying to coax my daughter out of the room with a puppet. My daughter's ignoring the puppet, but I'm seeing the puppet and I'm laughing at it. So,
and we've gone from
anyway, go with mommy.
We've gone from dog vomit to caterpillar goo, and
puppets in the doorway.
Puppets in the doorway. Well, in closing, let me wrap it up. And of course, as always, we went over in our time, and that's okay, because that's what it's about. But here we are, spring, a time of blossoming, and Althea blossomed while you led Althea, starting 7 years ago, right? I mean, no one can deny, even the people that thought you were Satan, or the people that left.
No, I was just a helper.
Oh, just one of his minions. Okay.
Here, Lucia, take this to mommy. Take that to mommy. You guys can do something with it upstairs. Go find your beads.
Ooh, fun times. Yeah, whether the people that thought you were Satan's minion or the people who really wanted divine science and didn't like the change, no one can deny that Althea blossomed, right? Pure numbers, pure energy, all that good stuff while you were there. And so you'll have to let us know, first of all, if, I think there's a book in this, right?
Thought about that.
I mean, 7 years at Althea Land, or maybe the Rocky Mountain Higher Consciousness, whatever you want to bring in your time here in the Rocky Mountains. But I hope there's a book in it. And I also hope that we talked about death, when you die many years from now, I don't know about you, but I'm planning on haunting Althea a little bit.
I think it's too full. That place is so haunted.
And we could do a whole session on that.
In a good way.
I know I want to haunt Althea. So, many, many years in the future, maybe I'll see you there on that plane of existence.
No way. I'm haunting like the tropical beaches of Jamaica.
Well, I'm hoping we can haunt many places. So how about
fair
that?
enough. Fair enough. I will
How about
definitely
that?
return to Althea. In that
There
case,
you go.
I will visit.
Good. Okay, you can visit. But again, we could talk for hours. We could talk just about the ghosts of Althea. But I have a few quotes that I think are just kind of cool. They fit, they don't fit. This is one, surprisingly, from Anthony Hopkins. You know the actor, Anthony Hopkins, British guy. None of us are getting out of here alive, so please stop treating yourself like an afterthought. Eat the delicious food, walk in the sunshine, jump in the ocean. Say the truth that you're carrying in your heart like hidden treasure. Be silly, be kind, be weird. There is no time for anything else. Go, Anthony.
Yeah, I think that encapsulates.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's kind of what I've been trying to say for 7 years.
Yeah.
He just said it effectively in 2 sentences.
Well, we like the long version too. This one is unknown. I don't know who said it, but I love it. Start late, start over, start scared, start again, just start, right?
Yeah.
So that's another good one. And then the last one from someone named Jeremy Goldberg. Courage is knowing it might hurt and doing it anyway. Stupidity is the same thing. And that's why life is hard. Right? I'll just repeat it. Courage is knowing it might hurt and doing it anyway. So is stupidity. Or stupidity is the same thing. And that's why life is hard. Thank you, Jeremy Goldberg. So we'll never be able to end this conversation in a way that feels like there's closure, but thank you for this time. Thank you for sharing these stories. We'll hear more from you in other ways.
Yeah.
In the future, I know.
Thank you for wanting to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope that whoever is listening, I hope they realize, that I certainly have believed in every single word I've said. And as such, if we as a community believe that God is all, right? Life, substance, love, everything. That means nothing happens outside God, right? So a relationship ending, a relationship changing, someone leaving a job, someone starting a job, someone being born, someone dying, all of it. And yes, it's sad, but true. Terrorism, political oppression, all of it. And what that means is that it's actually not God's responsibility to fix everything. It's all in God. And what God is the potential. It's the design. It's the capacity to evolve constantly, together and from anything. So I hope people remember that, because whether there's Jonathan or not, whether there's Althea or not, whether your spiritual path looks like what it did or not, it doesn't change the reality, which is that there are choices in front of us moment by moment every day, and we can come closer to our center and let life live through us, or we can fight it. We can try to be in control and we can judge it. And that's not a lot of fun. So thank you, Jenny.
You're so welcome. And fun is a good place to end. Yeah. So you've got the off switch. Thank you. And to your lovely family. And
I'm sorry. I'm sort of sorry for the interruptions.
No.
But since this is technically like the last official interview, I think it's kind of fun. And I'm glad people got to see Alusha. And for those who don't know her well, when she was around Althea, one of her favorite things was getting on that stage. And I remember do you remember when she was teeny tiny? Like one of the first times I brought her on the stage, she like grabbed that microphone and was like, brah, 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 brah. So maybe there's some foreshadowing, right?
Oh,
Maybe she'll be the minister in 30 years.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Well, vaya con Dios.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so
Take
much,
care.
Jenny, and lots of love to everyone.